I thought I had found a true friend when the new girl at school opened up about her family struggles and we bonded, but her betrayal, manipulation, and public humiliation not only shattered my trust, but also turned the entire school against me. So, Hunter joined our school last August. He was charming, intelligent, and genuinely kind without trying too hard. I developed an enormous crush on him instantly and confided in my friend, Valeria, about it. She was incredibly encouraging when I shared this. Her reaction was, "Oh my goodness, you two would be perfect together." She even assisted me in crafting messages to send him. We would dissect his replies as a team, and she continuously urged me to pursue him. I'd known Valeria since our freshman year, when we were assigned as partners for a biology assignment. We weren't best friends, but we occasionally spent time together on weekends and shared most of our classes. She always appeared supportive, helping me with math homework, inviting me to gatherings, that sort of thing. I completely trusted her, which makes everything that unfolded much more difficult. Hunter and I began conversing more frequently by October. He would wait for me after chemistry class, and we'd head to lunch together. Nothing major, but I was definitely captivated by him. Valeria kept requesting details about our chats, which I merely interpreted as her being a good companion. Once, he praised my presentation in history class, and I literally messaged Valeria from the restroom immediately afterward. She responded with an abundance of heart emojis and declared, "He's clearly interested in you." She even helped me select my outfit for the following day. I spent roughly 2 hours trying on various sweaters while on a video call with her. My mother noticed how much time I was investing in getting ready for school and often teased me about having a romantic interest. I didn't mention Hunter to her, though. My parents are the type who would insist on meeting him right away and scrutinizing everything, which would have been utterly embarrassing. In November, I finally mustered enough courage to invite him to a movie. Valeria helped me compose the text, instructing me precisely what to write. I was so anxious that I had to close my eyes as I pressed send. He took an eternity to reply, simply stating, "Apologies, was occupied on Sunday evening." Then on Monday at school, he essentially disregarded me. I was bewildered until Wednesday when Tiffany approached me at my locker, inquiring if I was bothering Hunter. I laughed it off until she revealed Valeria had been informing everyone that I was fixated on her boyfriend. Her boyfriend? I had no idea they were even communicating. That afternoon, I spotted them together in the parking area. His arm was around her waist. When she noticed me observing, she whispered something to him, and they both chuckled. I felt like such an imbecile. I couldn't even concentrate in class for the rest of the day. My English teacher, Mr. Benson, asked if I was feeling well because I kept staring out the window instead of participating in the discussion. I mumbled something about poor sleep, and he left me undisturbed. That night, I couldn't stop weeping. My brother, Rodney, heard me through the wall and tapped on my door, asking if I was all right. I told him it was just menstrual issues to make him leave. I didn't want anyone to know how foolish I felt. I confronted Valeria the next day during lunch. I was trembling so much I could barely manage my tray. I asked her how long she'd been seeing Hunter, and she casually responded they'd been together since September. September. The entire time she was assisting me with texting him, they were already in a relationship. When I questioned why she pretended to help me if she knew I had no chance, she merely shrugged and said she believed it was preferable to telling me to back off. She didn't even appear to think she'd done anything amiss. I just stood there with my lunch tray, feeling as though everyone was observing us. By Friday, the rumors had become pervasive. According to Valeria, I had been relentlessly pursuing Hunter, even though I supposedly knew they were dating. She displayed our text exchanges about him to others, distorting everything to portray me as unhinged. I began skipping lunch because I couldn't handle navigating the stairwells. My parents observed I wasn't eating and began asking questions. I informed them I was merely stressed about upcoming examinations. Dad even prepared my favorite pasta dinner that weekend to lift my spirits, which only made me feel worse for being dishonest. My friend Ruby sent me screenshots of a group chat where Valeria and her acquaintances were discussing my obsession. Hunter was also included, referring to me as that strange girl who wouldn't leave him alone. I wished I could vanish. I removed all social media applications from my phone for the weekend. Mom kept inquiring why I was so quiet, and I again attributed it to menstrual cramps. I spent most of Saturday in bed watching TikToks and disregarding messages. My friend Jess invited me to a film, but I invented an excuse about family commitments. I couldn't risk encountering Valeria or Hunter. December was dreadful. Someone scrawled "stalker" on my locker. My lab partner, Sam, requested a change because he'd heard things. When I attempted to explain my side to Tiffany, she cut me off, stating Valeria had warned her I would fabricate stories. In chemistry, we had group work and no one wanted me in their group. The teacher had to assign me to a team and they barely spoke to me the entire period. One girl literally moved her chair away from me as if I carried a contagious illness. The holiday dance was approaching, and I had already purchased a ticket before all this occurred. I ended up giving it to my brother's friend and telling my parents I had too much homework to attend. They expressed concern about me becoming antisocial, but didn't press the issue. I spent winter break avoiding everyone. My cousin visited for Christmas, and although we typically get along splendidly, I hardly spoke to her. My aunt repeatedly asked my mom if I was going through something, and I overheard them discussing adolescent depression one night when they thought I was asleep. When school resumed in January, I attempted to keep a low profile, but Valeria continued to exacerbate the situation. She and Hunter would kiss openly directly in front of me. She'd text me things like, "Hunter thought your outfit was amusing today," then deny sending anything. My father sat me down one weekend and asked what was transpiring. He suspected I might be using drugs or something. I nearly laughed at how mistaken he was. I ended up telling him I was simply anxious about college applications, even though those were still months away. He seemed relieved it wasn't drugs and offered to assist me in researching schools, which made me feel even more culpable for my deception. In February, someone created a bogus Instagram profile with my photo that sent unsettling messages to Hunter. Everyone presumed it was me. I was summoned to the counselor's office, and they contacted my parents. I repeatedly asserted it wasn't me, but no one believed me. My mother had to leave work early to attend a meeting at school. She was so perplexed and mortified. The counselor displayed the messages, and they were incredibly awkward. Phrases like, "I dream about you every night, and we're destined to be together." My mom kept reiterating, "This doesn't sound like my daughter at all," but the counselor merely gave her a sympathetic glance, as if she were in denial. When we arrived home, Mom tried to have a heart-to-heart about healthy relationships and obsession. I ended up shouting that I hadn't done it and slamming my door. We barely communicated for days afterward. The only person who still interacted with me was Ruby's freshman sister, Yael. She believed me because Valeria had been unkind to her before, too. One day in March, I was at her house studying when she went to get snacks. Her Facebook was open on her laptop, and I spotted Valeria's name in a conversation with Ruby. I know I shouldn't have looked, but I couldn't resist. What I discovered made me ill. Valeria had informed Hunter she was expecting a child to prevent him from ending their relationship. She wasn't pregnant at all. She was feigning morning sickness, fabricating doctor's appointments, and had sworn Ruby to secrecy. There were messages where Ruby inquired about ultrasound images Valeria had shown Hunter, and Valeria admitted she acquired them from Google. She explicitly told Ruby she wasn't pregnant, but needed Hunter to remain with her. I captured images of the conversation with my phone while Yael was downstairs. I felt guilty for prying, but also as though I'd finally found evidence that Valeria was a deceiver. When Yael returned, I informed her of what I saw. She wasn't even surprised. She mentioned that many people knew, except Hunter, and Valeria had threatened anyone who might reveal it to him. I went home that day feeling like I was burdened by an immense secret. I couldn't concentrate on homework or even the shows I was watching. My mom asked if I was feeling okay because I barely touched dinner. I said I had a headache, which wasn't entirely false. My head was throbbing from all the pressure. I didn't know what to do with this knowledge. Meanwhile, Valeria continued to sabotage my life. In April, she persuaded our English teacher to relocate my seat because I was supposedly making her uncomfortable by glancing at Hunter. My mom and dad debated about it one night when they believed I couldn't hear. Mom wanted me to have a fresh start elsewhere. But Dad argued that retreating wouldn't resolve anything and would instill the wrong lesson. I sat at the top of the stairs, listening to them quarrel about my future. Rodney found me there and sat beside me. He's only 14, but sometimes he appears wiser than me. He asked if I was all right, and for some reason, I actually confided in him about everything. The infatuation, Valeria's falsehoods, the fake pregnancy, all of it. He simply listened without interrupting, which was unusual for him since he typically can't stop talking. When I finished, he declared Valeria sounded like a deranged person, and I should tell Hunter the truth. I explained how no one would believe me, and it would only worsen the situation. He couldn't comprehend why I wouldn't simply retaliate. Then Hunter posted an elaborate prom invitation for Valeria on Instagram with the caption, "Can't wait to begin our future with the mother of my child." Everyone was commenting, "Congratulations about the baby." I snapped. I created an anonymous email and sent Hunter all the screenshots from Ruby and Yael's conversation. I demonstrated how the fabricated ultrasound image corresponded with the Google result. I included specific details only Valeria would know. I felt sick after dispatching it. I couldn't sleep that night, just staring at my ceiling, wondering if I'd made everything worse. My mom entered to check on me because my light was still illuminated at 2 a.m. I pretended to have fallen asleep while reading. 3 days later, everything unraveled. Hunter confronted Valeria, and she admitted the pregnancy was a fabrication, but she somehow twisted it around and claimed I'd been plotting revenge because I was envious. She asserted I had catfished her to trick her into revealing her secrets. Hunter broke up with her, but that only exacerbated my own difficulties. People were repulsed by her deception, but even more disgusted by my relentless investigation and brutal exposure of her personal matters. Sam remarked in chemistry class that only a psychopath would gather evidence for months just to ruin someone. Ruby challenged me about stealing conversations from her sister's computer, even though Yael told her she displayed them willingly. My phone was inundated with messages from unfamiliar numbers, calling me a deranged stalker and worse. Someone created a fake Twitter account in my name that posted bizarre, obsessive content. I showed my parents, and they were appalled. Dad wanted to involve the police, but Mom said there was no way to ascertain who was behind it. Last week, Valeria's parents lodged a complaint with the school. I was suspended for cyberbullying and fostering a hostile environment. Hunter texted to express gratitude for telling him the truth, then blocked me across all platforms. My mom wept when the principal called regarding my suspension. Dad became so enraged, he had to leave the room during the meeting. When we arrived home, they argued again. Mom suggesting we should have changed schools when we had the opportunity. Dad contending the school was completely out of line, penalizing me instead of Valeria. I confined myself to my room and put on my headphones so I wouldn't have to hear them disputing about me. Rodney slipped a chocolate bar under my door with a note that read, "This stinks. Not your fault." It made me cry even harder. So, I exposed someone who shamed me and propagated falsehoods about me for months. I unveiled a manipulation that was ensnaring someone in a relationship built on a monumental lie. Yet now, I'm the poisonous one. I'm the antagonist. Is it ever acceptable to reveal someone's private matters if they harmed you first? Because from my vantage point, the answer appears to be no, regardless of how justified you might be. Update. We'll share more tomorrow. A great deal has transpired since then. Update. Thank you for all your comments. Reading them made me feel less isolated, even if I'm still a wreck about everything. Here's what has been happening since my suspension. My parents are reacting to this completely differently. Mom keeps arranging meetings with the principal and threatening legal action if they don't rectify my suspension. Dad is more quietly furious. He keeps asserting the school is teaching me that confronting deceivers leads to punishment. They are constantly arguing when they believe I can't hear them. Mom believes the school is mishandling everything, but she also thinks I should have approached her before sending those screenshots to Hunter. Dad says I acted correctly in exposing a liar, but he's concerned about how this will impact my college applications. They both keep asking if I'm alright, but with entirely distinct tones. Mom, all worried and gentle. Dad attempting to sound nonchalant, but clearly anxious. They managed to reduce my suspension from 2 weeks to 1. But returning to school on Monday was dreadful. People weren't just whispering anymore. They overtly moved away when I approached. My usual lunch table was suddenly occupied when I attempted to sit down. I ended up eating in a bathroom stall that first day back. I know it's unhygienic and pitiful, but I couldn't face the cafeteria again after that initial rejection. I kept recalling those movie scenes where the isolated student eats alone. From behind. On Wednesday, I overheard Tiffany saying Valeria might transfer schools due to the hostile environment I'd supposedly created. The irony is staggering. I wanted to shout that she was the one who generated a hostile environment for me. That afternoon in gym class, someone accidentally struck me in the back with a volleyball. I'm fairly certain it was one of Valeria's friends, but I couldn't substantiate it. The gym teacher simply told us to be more careful. My back bore a red mark for hours afterward. When I arrived home, Rodney was waiting at the door, looking strangely excited. He said he had a strategy to clear my name that involved creating a fake social media account to trick Valeria into confessing her lies. I immediately dismissed that idea. The last thing I needed was to be caught creating fake accounts when that's what people were already accusing me of doing. He looked disheartened, but I explained that fighting fire with fire would only exacerbate the situation. He reluctantly agreed, but maintained he still thought Valeria deserved retribution. I told him retribution apparently takes holidays when it concerns popular girls. Things became odd on Thursday when Hunter texted asking if we could meet. I was apprehensive, but consented. My brother Rodney insisted on accompanying me and sitting nearby, just in case. It was somewhat endearing, even if his protective demeanor was ludicrous given he's younger than me. He wore a baseball cap pulled low as if he were some sort of clandestine agent and kept dramatically scanning the room. I had to instruct him multiple times to stop staring at Hunter and behave normally. He ordered a complicated frappuccino concoction with extra whipped cream and then complained it was too sweet. The entire scenario would have been humorous if I wasn't so stressed about meeting Hunter. Hunter appeared better than he did at school. He apologized for not defending me sooner. He said he'd been confused and embarrassed about the fabricated pregnancy. He kept fiddling with his coffee cup. He told me he felt foolish for succumbing to Valirex in films. They usually appear composed and unbothered. I just felt like weeping the whole time. When I got home, Mom asked how my first day back was, and I lied and said it was fine. But then I went to the bathroom and vomited from the stress. Rodney heard me and knocked on the door, asking if I was okay. I told him I might have food poisoning. He offered to make me toast, which was genuinely thoughtful. The school counselor had the audacity to suggest I compose an apology letter to Valeria. When I flat out refused, she gave me a look as if I were being difficult and mentioned something about accepting responsibility regardless of provocation. For what? For telling the truth? She gave me a worksheet on conflict resolution and empathy building to complete. It contained questions like, how might the other person feel about what happened? And what could you have done differently? I wanted to scream that Valeria was the one who should be filling this out, not me. I shoved the worksheet into my backpack and never looked at it again. Meanwhile, Valeria is executing her strategy flawlessly. She's posting poignant captions on Instagram about recovering from betrayal and recognizing true friends. Her follower count is actually increasing. She removed all her pictures with Hunter and replaced them with group shots of her surrounded by companions. The comments are filled with hearts and "we love you" messages. She even posted a lengthy paragraph about forgiveness and how she's choosing to rise above negativity. She never identified me by name, but everyone understood who she was referring to. My mother caught me crying while browsing Instagram and confiscated my phone for the night. She asserted social media was only making everything worse. She's probably correct, but being disconnected only made me feel more isolated. When I returned to school, I discovered Ruby was telling everyone I coerced Yoel into showing me private conversations. According to her, I'd been scheming for months to unearth damaging information about Valeria. Yoel initially tried to defend me, but Ruby threatened to inform their parents about Yoel's vaping if she didn't corroborate the story. Now Yoel won't even glance at me in the hallways. I attempted to speak with Yoel between classes, but she literally turned and walked the other way. Later, she texted me expressing her regret, but stated Ruby would make her life miserable if she didn't conform to the narrative. She mentioned their parents would be furious if they discovered the vaping, and Ruby possessed photographic evidence. I told her I understood, but it still hurt. The worst part is my parents began quarreling about what course of action to take. Mom believes I should transfer schools for senior year. Dad argues that's surrendering to the tormentors. They have these hushed disagreements when they think I can't hear them. I overheard Mom crying in their room after a particularly harsh argument. I almost entered to comfort her, but I knew it would only distress her further to realize I heard them fighting. Instead, I texted her a heart emoji without any explanation. She came to my room a few minutes later and simply embraced me without speaking. We both pretended not to notice we'd been crying. I feel so responsible for causing problems at home, too. My younger brother Rodney is caught in the middle, attempting to crack silly jokes at dinner while Mom and Dad glare at each other. He's only 14 and shouldn't have to endure this. He tried to cheer me up by showing me these absurd TikToks he made with his friends. They were genuinely amusing, and for a few minutes, I forgot all the drama. Then he asked if I wanted to be in one with him, and I realized I couldn't risk being on social media at all right now. The look of disappointment on his face made me feel even worse. 3 days after I went back to school, Hunter approached my locker. He asked if we could talk somewhere private, so we went to the deserted band room during lunch. I was afraid someone would spot us together and ignite more gossip, but also strangely pleased that he wanted to speak with me. He said he wanted to thank me for disclosing the truth. He told me Valeria had completely convinced him. She had even faked vomiting in front of him, vanishing into restrooms to purge. She showed him ultrasound photos with his last name digitally added. He appeared so ashamed, admitting how thoroughly she had deceived him. When I inquired why he blocked me after thanking me, he explained Valeria still had access to his phone and blocked me herself before he updated his passwords. He seemed genuinely remorseful about that, which made me feel a little better. He told me Valeria had been telling people I fabricated all the evidence, but he didn't believe it because the conversations contained details from months ago that I couldn't possibly have known. He said he was still processing everything and felt like a fool for believing her. Things became awkward when he asked if I had genuinely been infatuated with him. I told him the truth. I had a crush on him, and Valeria knew because I confided in her. That's what made it so painful. He said Valeria told him I'd been tracking both of them since before they started dating. He looked truly stunned when I explained how Valeria had been helping me compose messages to him while they were secretly involved. I could see him piecing everything together in his mind, realizing just how manipulative she had been to both of us. After our discussion, Hunter stated he believed me, but we probably shouldn't be seen conversing at school. He didn't want more conflict. I understood, but it still stung. He checked the hallway before departing to ensure no one observed us together. That night, I completely broke down. Mom found me weeping and sat with me for hours. I confided everything in her, not just the Hunter Valeria situation, but how isolated I'd felt, how I couldn't endure the loneliness anymore. She kept stroking my hair, as she did when I was a child. And for once, she didn't attempt to offer solutions or tell me everything would be fine. She simply listened. She suggested I speak to her sister, my Aunt Kelly, who experienced something similar in high school. I was skeptical. Adults always assume their high school experiences relate to yours, but they're usually oblivious. But I was desperate enough to try anything. I telephoned Aunt Kelly the next day after school. I was anxious at first, but she was surprisingly understanding about everything. She didn't deliver any cliched "it gets better" speeches. She actually recounted how her closest friend turned everyone against her senior year over a boy, and how she felt like her life was over. She said high school feels like the entire world when you're in it, but in a few years, none of this will matter. Easy for her to say when she's 38 with a career and family, but it did provide a little comfort to know she'd survived something similar. Aunt Kelly advised me to focus on the people who still supported me and disregard everyone else as much as possible. My grades are plummeting because it's impossible to focus. Every time someone whispers in class, I'm convinced they're talking about me. I've started sitting in the back row whenever feasible, so I don't have to feel eyes on me. IA's deceptions. He said the more he considered it, the more warning signs he could identify, but at the time, he was flattered by her attention. He mentioned that she was constantly checking his phone and becoming upset if he didn't reply to messages promptly. We were actually having a pleasant conversation until Valeria entered with 2 friends. Not a coincidence. Hunter later admitted she tracks his location, and he forgot to disable it. She made a grand display of being shocked to see us, then loudly told her friends that I simply couldn't leave them alone, even after everything that had occurred. Rodney was halfway out of his seat, seemingly ready to confront her, but I gave him a look that conveyed, "Don't you dare." Valeria's friends were taking pictures with their phones, and I knew this would be all over social media within minutes. Hunter astonished me by actually confronting her. He told her to cease spreading lies. He said he now knew the truth, that I had been attracted to him. She was aware of it, and pursued him anyway. He knew she was never pregnant, and had manipulated everyone. Valeria immediately started crying, asserting she couldn't believe he was siding with me after everything they'd endured. Everyone in the coffee shop was staring. Her friends glared at me, as if I had instigated the scene. An older woman at the adjacent table was openly observing the entire situation, as if it were a television drama. We departed swiftly. Hunter escorted us to our car and again thanked me for informing him of the truth, even though it cost me so much. He said he wasn't prepared for any relationship at present but hoped we could potentially be friends eventually. Rodney was buzzing with enthusiasm the entire journey home, declaring Hunter was genuinely cool, and Valeria received her just deserts. I was simply drained and dreading the inevitable repercussions that would surface the following day. When I arrived home, my parents were seated at the kitchen table looking solemn. The school had contacted them. Valeria's parents were threatening to pursue a restraining order against me, alleging I was harassing their daughter by meeting with Hunter. They had somehow learned about the coffee shop encounter within hours. They questioned me precisely about what transpired, and I explained everything. How Hunter had messaged me, how Valeria appeared after we were already there, how I didn't approach her at all. Dad was jotting down notes the whole time, his handwriting growing more disorderly as his agitation increased. My parents had another disagreement that night about how to address everything. Mom wanted to be proactive and speak with Valeria's parents directly to de-escalate the situation. Dad thought that would worsen things and preferred to wait and see if they actually filed for a restraining order, or if it was merely a threat. I could hear them from my room, their voices rising and falling as they transitioned from discussing logical next steps to expressing their frustrations. At one point, Mom began weeping, stating she just wanted her joyful daughter back. That made me feel dreadful. The next morning at school, someone had affixed a negative pregnancy test to my locker, accompanied by a note that declared, "Unlike some individuals, I am not a fabricator." A teacher noticed it and removed it before most students arrived, but a few early students definitely saw it. The teacher asked if I knew who did it, but of course, I had no evidence. At lunch, I attempted to sit with a group of girls I'm cordial with, but not close to. They didn't tell me to leave, but they suddenly became engrossed in their phones and ceased conversing. After 5 minutes of agonizing silence, I manufactured an excuse about forgetting something in my locker and departed. The worst part is I'm starting to second-guess myself. Was transmitting those screenshots the correct course of action? Should I have found an alternative way to tell Hunter? Should I have simply minded my own business and allowed him to discover it eventually? Dad says I did what anyone would do when confronted with such a colossal deception. Mom says she comprehends why I did it, but wishes I'd handled it differently. I still don't know if I acted appropriately. Was it worthwhile? Hunter now knows the truth, but my life is in complete disarray. My family is under strain, and my final year of high school is ruined by this ordeal. If I could rewind, would I still send those screenshots to Hunter? I honestly don't know, but I'm so weary of being the antagonist in someone else's narrative. For those who inquired, no, I haven't tried speaking to Valeria directly since all this unfolded. With legal threats being exchanged, I don't believe that would improve anything. Part of me desires to ask her why she did all this, but another part knows there's probably no explanation that would satisfy me or make any of this comprehensible. I'll update if anything significant changes. Right now, I'm just trying to endure each day and concentrate on graduating. All I desire is to go somewhere no one knows the story, where I can begin anew without being that crazy stalker girl, or whatever label they've affixed to me. Thank you for reading this muddled account. It helped more than you can imagine. Final update, it's been a month since my last post. My apologies for the silence. I required time to process everything before writing again. Thank you for all the supportive messages. The Monday after my last entry was one of the most terrible days yet. I walked into school to find people staring at their phones and then looking up at me. It turned out Valeria's friends had posted photos from the coffee shop confrontation with a completely distorted account of what occurred. According to their posts, I had ambushed Valeria, and Hunter had defended me out of pity. There were comments calling me pathetic, insane, stalker, you name it. I almost turned around and went home, but I knew that would only worsen the situation. Instead, I put on my headphones, played loud music, and pretended I couldn't hear the murmurs as I walked to my locker. That's when I found the note, simply the word liar in large letters affixed to my locker. I showed it to the counselor, who essentially shrugged and said there was nothing she could do without knowing who placed it there. She suggested I was focusing too much on the negative and should move forward. In history class, Miss Parker assigned group projects, and no one would meet my gaze when she asked us to form groups. She ended up having to assign me to a group, and they all looked as though they'd been sentenced to community service. During lunch, I sought refuge in the library. The librarian, Mrs. Gonzalez, has always been kind to me. She pretended not to notice I was consuming a sandwich behind a book, which is against the rules, and even suggested a novel she thought I'd enjoy. It was a minor act of kindness that meant more than she probably realized. That same day, I was summoned to the principal's office. Valeria's parents filed a formal complaint against me for harassment and bullying. They sought more severe punishment beyond my suspension. They asserted I was still disseminating rumors and had orchestrated the coffee shop incident to humiliate her. Principal Matthew appeared utterly fatigued by the entire ordeal. He barely looked at me while explaining the complaint. He told me that without proof of who left the note, he couldn't take action, but any further incidents involving Valeria would result in serious repercussions. When I tried to articulate my perspective, he interrupted me, stating he had heard enough from both sides. I departed his office feeling like I might vomit. I went directly to the restroom and called Mom, crying. She arrived immediately and demanded to see the principal. I could hear her shouting through the door. When she emerged, she looked enraged but satisfied. In the car, she informed me she had made it clear that if the school penalized me again without addressing the harassment I was experiencing, we would explore legal options. I didn't tell her that made me even more anxious. The last thing I wanted was to become the girl whose mother sued the school. That would only amplify the target on my back. That night, we held a family meeting in the living room. Dad made it official by turning off the television and making Rodney put away his phone. They stated they were worried about how this was impacting all of us. Mom confessed she wasn't sleeping. Dad said he was distracted at work. Mom asked what I wished to do, continue fighting, change schools, or something else. I honestly didn't know. Mom and Dad agreed to grant me time to consider it. They wouldn't make any decisions without my input. The following day at school, I kept my head down and attempted to be invisible. It largely worked until gym class when we had to select teams for volleyball. I was the very last person chosen, and even then, the team captain rolled her eyes as if she were being compelled to take me. During the game, no one would pass to me, even when I was in the optimal position. I feigned indifference, but it was mortifying. After school, I had therapy with Dr. Landry. I finally divulged the complete truth about everything, including discovering the pregnancy information on Yael's computer. I feared she would judge me, but she simply listened without interruption. When I finished, she said something that genuinely helped. You're not responsible for other people's lies, only for how you respond to them. That weekend, my parents took us to visit my grandparents in the neighboring town. It was actually a relief to be somewhere different with people who were unaware of any of the drama. Grandma doted on how thin I looked and kept trying to feed me while Grandpa taught Rodney some card tricks. For a few hours, things felt almost normal. Sunday night, Hunter texted me asking how I was doing. We ended up messaging for hours. He told me more about his relationship with Valeria, how controlling she'd been, constantly checking his phone, becoming upset if he spent time with friends without her. He said the pregnancy lie was the most extreme thing, but looking back, he could see she'd been manipulating him all along. He apologized again for believing her lies about me and for not standing up sooner. He seemed truly contrite, which helped alleviate some of the pain. We agreed to be cautious but perhaps try being friends. He suggested we could study together sometime, off campus, to avoid drama. Monday morning, I felt marginally better about things. Having Hunter believe me and apologize made a difference, even if the rest of the school still considered me unbalanced. But when I arrived at first period, I noticed people looking at their phones and then at me again. My stomach sank. Someone had created a fake profile using my name and picture on a dating app. The profile stated I was seeking pregnancy roleplay and other repulsive content. Screenshots were circulating throughout the school. I wanted to perish from embarrassment. I went directly to the counselor's office, but she was with another student. The secretary took one look at my face and allowed me to wait in the empty conference room instead of the main office where everyone could see me crying. When I finally saw Miss Barnes, I showed her the screenshots. She looked uncomfortable but said since it was created outside of school, there wasn't much they could do. Asked if they could at least make an announcement that it wasn't me, but she said that would only attract more attention to it. I called Mom from the office, and she came to pick me up. I couldn't endure the rest of the day with everyone thinking I'd created that profile. In the car, Mom was livid. She wanted to go straight to Valeria's house and confront her parents, but I implored her not to. That would only worsen everything. Instead, we went home and reported the fake profile to the dating app. They said they'd investigate, but who knows how long that would take. Dad came home early when Mom called him, and they spent the evening making calls to their lawyer friend, to the school board, even to the local police to see if this constituted identity theft or harassment. The police officer they spoke to wasn't very helpful. He said unless there were specific threats, it was a school issue, not a criminal one. Dad was frustrated, but Mom pointed out that involving law enforcement would just escalate everything even further. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing everyone at school looking at those screenshots, thinking that was genuinely me. Around 2 a.m., I went downstairs for some water and found Dad still awake, researching cyber harassment laws on his laptop. He looked so exhausted but resolute. It made me feel both cherished and guilty for causing so much trouble. The next morning, I compelled myself to return to school. Mom offered to let me stay home, but I knew hiding would only amplify the rumors. I donned my most confident attire, black jeans, boots, and the denim jacket I always receive compliments on like armor. In English, Mr. Benson paired us for peer editing, and everyone shifted nervously when he called my name. He ended up partnering me with Jane, a quiet girl who typically sits in the back. To my surprise, Jane was actually normal with me. She didn't act strangely or avoid eye contact. She simply inquired about my essay and offered thoughtful feedback. When class concluded, she mentioned she'd seen the fake profile and knew it wasn't really me because the writing style was completely distinct. It was such a minor detail, but knowing even one person didn't believe the worst about me felt monumental. At lunch, I was heading to the library again when Hunter texted asking if I wanted to meet in the music practice rooms. They're small, soundproofed rooms where band students rehearse, but they're usually vacant during lunch. I agreed, even though I was apprehensive about being seen with him. We sat on the floor, sharing his earbuds, listening to a new album he thought I'd appreciate. We didn't talk much about the drama, which was a welcome respite. It was just 30 minutes of typical teenage conversation, music, complaining about homework, discussing films. When the bell rang, he checked the hallway before we left, and we went in opposite directions. That weekend, Hunter asked if I wanted to go hiking at the state park with him and his cousin who was visiting from college. It wasn't precisely a date, but it was an opportunity to spend time away from school drama. Mom was hesitant but consented after I promised to keep my phone on and text her every hour. The hike was exactly what I needed: fresh air, physical activity, and conversation that had nothing to do with high school nonsense. Hunter's cousin Matt was pleasant and treated me normally, since he didn't know anything about the drama. For a few hours, I remembered what it felt like to simply be a regular teenager. When Hunter dropped me off, he awkwardly asked if I might want to go to a movie sometime, just the two of us. I said yes before I could overthink it. He looked relieved and smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in weeks. Monday at school, things took another turn. The fake dating profile had been removed. But now there were whispers that I was secretly seeing Hunter. Someone had spotted us at the state park and jumped to conclusions. By third period, Valeria had become aware of it. She cornered me in the bathroom between classes. For a moment, I thought she might actually strike me. She looked so furious. Instead, she just stared at me and declared I would regret attempting to take her boyfriend. I pointed out that he wasn't her boyfriend anymore, and she wasn't pregnant either. Her face became blotchy, and she stormed out without washing her hands. At lunch, I informed Hunter about the bathroom confrontation. He looked troubled and suggested perhaps we should cool things off for a while. I felt disappointed, but understood his reasoning. The last thing either of us needed was more complications. When I got home, Valeria had posted another ambiguous Instagram message about girls who disrespect relationships and karma coming for liars. She didn't tag me, but everyone knew who she meant. The comments were filled with her friends posting supportive messages and snake emojis. I decided to remove Instagram from my phone again. I didn't need to see that poisonous content. The next morning, "Boyfriend Stealer" was written on my locker in Sharpie. The janitor tried to clean it off, but you could still discern the faint outline of the words. Principal saw it and finally appeared to take things more seriously. He called me to his office and asked if I knew who might have done it. I said I had my suspicions, but no proof. He surprised me by stating they would review the hallway security footage. After school, Hunter texted to check in. Despite his suggestion to cool things off, he still wanted to ensure I was okay after the locker incident. We ended up talking on the phone for an hour that night. He told me Valeria had been constantly messaging him, sometimes angry, sometimes apologizing, sometimes threatening to tell everyone he pressured her into fabricating the pregnancy. He finally blocked her number. The next day at school, I was summoned back to Principal Matthews' office. To my astonishment, Valeria was there too, looking sullen. The principal informed us that the security footage showed Valeria writing on my locker. She was being given in-school suspension for vandalism and harassment. Valeria didn't even attempt to deny it. She just glared at me, as if this were somehow my fault. The principal warned both of us that any further incidents would result in more severe consequences. He also mentioned that my previous suspension was being reevaluated in light of new information. I left his office feeling vindicated, but also anxious about potential backlash. If Valeria was angry before, she would be furious now. But at least the school was finally taking action instead of dismissing everything. When I told my parents about the suspension, they were cautiously optimistic. Dad said it was about time the school intervened, while Mom worried it would only make Valeria more determined to retaliate. The next few days were unusually quiet. Valeria was serving her in-school suspension, and without her actively instigating trouble, the drama seemed to subside somewhat. People still whispered occasionally, but it felt less intense. Jane and I collaborated on our English project, and Hunter and I continued our clandestine lunch meetings in the practice rooms. On Friday, Hunter formally asked me to attend a movie with him on Saturday, not as friends, but as a date. I accepted, even though I was apprehensive about how people would react. We agreed to go to a theater in the next town over to avoid encountering anyone from school. The date was both wonderful and somewhat awkward. We were both so nervous that we barely spoke during the first half of the movie. But afterward, over pizza, the conversation finally began to flow. We discussed everything: our families, our post-graduation plans, our favorite music. It felt normal and pleasant. He held my hand as we walked back to his car, and I didn't even fret about who might see us. When he dropped me off, we sat in his car talking for another hour. He apologized again for believing Valeria's lies and elucidated how manipulative she had been throughout their relationship. When he finally kissed me goodnight, it felt like the first positive thing to happen in months. Of course, by Monday morning, someone had spotted us at the pizza place, and the news had spread. The whispers began again, as soon as I entered school. In the bathroom, I overheard two girls debating whether I had stolen Hunter from Valeria or if he was merely using me to provoke her jealousy. Neither considered that perhaps we genuinely liked each other. Valeria was back from suspension and clearly knew about the date. She cornered me in the hallway and deliberately bumped my shoulder hard enough to make me drop my books. She didn't say anything, just gave me a chilling look and continued walking. At lunch, Jane waved me over to her table. As I sat down, she quietly cautioned me that Valeria and her friends were planning something. She didn't know precisely what, but she'd overheard them discussing, teaching me a lesson. I thanked her for the warning and attempted to act normally through lunch, but inside I was panicking. After school, I informed Hunter about Jane's warning. He looked concerned and offered to drive me home. As we walked to the parking lot, we saw Valeria and 3 of her friends waiting by my usual route. Hunter put his arm around my shoulders and walked confidently past them. They didn't do anything except glare, but it was nonetheless intimidating. In the car, Hunter suggested we should simply publicize our relationship. He argued that sneaking around made it seem like we had something to conceal, which only fueled Valeria's narrative. I was fearful of the backlash, but agreed it might be better than constantly looking over our shoulders. The next day, we walked into school together, openly as a couple. Valeria's reaction was precisely what I anticipated. By lunch, she had posted a long, melodramatic Instagram story. She didn't use names, but included enough details that everyone knew who she meant. Her friends were shooting daggers at us in the cafeteria. That weekend, Hunter and I went to the mall together, openly as a couple. We encountered a few people from school, but most simply nodded and continued about their business. Someone took a picture of us, probably to send to her, but we chose not to care. My parents have relaxed somewhat as things have improved. Mom still checks in more frequently than she used to, but she's not constantly hovering. Dad has been teaching me to drive his car on weekends, which gives us time to talk without directly discussing all the drama. Yesterday was the final day of school before break. As I was clearing out my locker, Tiffany walked by with some other girls. Instead of the usual hostile glances, she simply nodded. Summer begins tomorrow. I'm focusing on my driving test, preparing for college applications, and endeavoring to reconstruct my life. My family is closer now. I know who my true friends are, not many, but that's fine. And I've learned more about myself than I ever desired. If anyone is in a similar predicament, my sole advice is to find at least one person who believes you, and remember that high school, even though it feels like your entire world right now, is temporary. The people who genuinely matter will eventually perceive the truth. Thank you for reading my chaotic story. It helped more than you can imagine.